You ready?
All right. I was born ready.
He was born ready. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the great honor of introducing, well, he needs no introduction, Terry Warburton, who is celebrating 50 years in business. And I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with us today on the Rumors and Dreams podcast. This is all about Terry and his story and his journey, not just in life, but of course, touching the lives of so many people.
Thank you, Jason. I've done my best to do that and enjoy my life as I'm doing it.
Nice.
So far, it's early in the game, only 50 years. It's working out pretty good. So I'll let you know how it works out in the second half, you know.
You know, I hope I'm there with you.
I hope so too. You're younger than I am, so you might make it. You know? Anyway, so Jason asked me to do this, and I'm more than happy to do it because while I've still got my memory and I'm, pre-dementia, I think, and then I'll remember everything that's happened and come up with a story that might not bore you to death, and you've already shut it off by now. But if you're still with us, what would you like to know, Jason?
I'd really love to know before you even got started, because I know you told me your resume is very short, right? So before you even got started with your first job, what were your dreams?
I was going to be a veterinarian, and then one day I had to go to high school and realized that I had an option. I could join the choir and sing, I could take art, or I could play a musical instrument. Well, the artistic part of the family went to my brother and sister. Singing was not something I'd really thought about, so I thought, well, I'll play a musical instrument. Were there instruments in my family? Hell no. I had no idea. Coincidentally, Herb Alpert was playing The Lonely Bull on the radio, 1964. And I thought, wow, the trumpet, that sounds like an interesting instrument. And a friend of mine, Earl Krentz, who I have not seen since, but that's a different story, said, hey, I play trumpet. You want to try one? I went, sure. And we used to be, I'm a big swimmer. I was on the city championship swim team, just for the record. And Earl and I went to his garage. He pulls out a trumpet. I'm like, wow, look at that thing, right? That's crazy. And he goes, all right, it's what you do. And I went, all right, cool. Pick it up. Bah! And I went, oh, cool. All right, I got this. So I get to high school, and the band director, Brian Rose, says, all right, who wants to play the clarinet? Everybody's, who wants to play the trumpet? All the hands fly up, right? And he goes, all right, well, we're going to have a problem here. He goes, so you guys all line up that want to play the trumpet. He goes, and here's how you do it. And they're like, and you can imagine, right? So everybody's like, he goes, next. He got to me and went, bah! And he goes, you play trumpet. And I'm like, okay.
Well, you lucked out there, right?
I know. Right?
You had a little practice session.
I know. If it wasn't for that, I'd be one of the...
And then you'd be on clarinet.
Oh,
You'd be making reeds right now.
God forbid. Oh, please, I'm trying to drink. So anyways, I started to play the trumpet and realized I loved it. I loved playing the trumpet. This was like, wow, this is me. I am so with this thing. And so I heard that the senior band trumpet soloist, Dan Moyer, who were friends to this day, if you can imagine, this is 1964. And I heard him play and I went, oh yeah, I want to be a trumpet player. They got all the chicks. I mean, no, anyways, so they got all the high notes, that's what it was, yeah. So I thought, all right, I want to play the trumpet. So I played the trumpet that year, and I was, other than math, drafting, the next best thing I did was play the trumpet.
Okay.
Coincidentally.
So you were
technical school I went to.
Okay, so you were like engineer mind.
Apparently.
Yeah.
That comes from being Austrian, like Vincent Bach, Renaud Schulke. What a coincidence.
There you go.
So anyways, I decided that's it. I just want to play the trumpet for a living. And I started practicing every day. Drove my parents nuts, of course. Bought my first trumpet for $25, Chinese piece of brass. And practiced like a maniac. And got pretty good at it. And started to play here and there. And then the next thing you know, I'm in a Ukrainian polka band. That was interesting. Going to gigs at weddings where nobody spoke English, which was a challenge. And so was the music. As I pulled it out, I'm like, oh my God, I have to read that?
Polkas are hard.
Oh, it was, it's like, and then I'm like, oh, this shouldn't be too bad. And then they counted it off, and I went, oh, now it just got bad.
Yeah.
It's like,
I know they
slowly,
go
this
so
might not have
fast.
been bad. Fast, not so much.
I know it. Did you have, was it a polka band with like drums and an accordion, or what was it?
We actually had a drummer, an accordion player, a saxophone player, and me on trumpet.
Okay, so it's pretty exposed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Everyone knows when you mess up until they've had enough drinks.
I was going to say, it was a Ukrainian wedding, so it didn't take long before nobody really cared what I was doing.
Exactly.
That was a very interesting time, by the way, but that's a whole other video. And so I was doing that, going through high school, and then I decided that high school and me really didn't get along. So I was bored, and I got up one day and I said, excuse me, sir, do I sign out or what? And the guy's like, well, what do you mean? I said, I think I'm done. So I went down to the office and I went, do I sign anything to get out of here, or what do I do? What? So I quit. Meanwhile, I had already started working in Long McQuaid Music Store in Toronto, where I was born, and was working there. My brother ran the band department. He hired me to like go in there, and my first job was fixing clarinets that came back from rental. Clarinets always in there somewhere. So I learned to fix clarinets, and next thing you know, I was good at that. So then I could fix all the flutes, and then I fixed the oboes, and then I had to fix the bassoons. I'm like, what about the trumpets? I don't need fixing. I only got 3 things. I'm like, oh, jeez, this is not really as much fun as I thought. Anyway, so that was my first job. And then my brother decided to be a blues band saxophone player, and he was very good at it. So him and Downchild Blues Band went on the road, and the owner of the music store said, well, what am I going to do? And my brother went, oh, he can handle it. You have to understand, the owner, Jack, God bless him, still alive, 90, he's probably 1,000 years old now. He looked at me, and there's Terry, hair in a flip. No joke, I had a picture once, thank God it burned up. And he goes, he can run the band department? My brother went, oh, trust me, he can run the band department. And I'm like, fine. So that was my first, hired full-time as the band instrument salesman. I discovered I was a better salesman than I was a trumpet player. But the reason I was a better salesman than a trumpet player was because early on in about grade 10, I was in a high note competition with my friend, whose name eludes me at the moment. And we were sitting there playing one note higher than the next, and I was not to be denied. That ties in later to this, by the way. So we're playing and higher and higher and higher and higher. So I got to A above double C and went, boop. I went, oh, ow, that really hurt. No blood. And I'm like, man, what's up with that? And I'm like, all right, contest is over, I win. And the next day I picked it up and went, I'm like, oh, there's a problem here.
Yeah.
So I went from double C to middle C, and middle C was not that easy. So I came to discover later in life that this is actually called Satchmo syndrome. You actually bust the muscle that runs across the orbicus with some fancy name, I don't know what it is, it doesn't matter. So anyways, there it was, and I'm like, oh, that sucks. Meanwhile, I kept playing the trumpet, and I thought, oh man, I'm not having a lot of fun with this because it hurts. And I kept playing anyways, and then that's when I got interested in mouthpieces, to find if there's something that
Looking for
is going to work better for my chops. So I ended up, and of course I worked at the music store, and we get all the mouthpieces in the world there, and I had a full set of Giardinelli mouthpieces, so I'm looking at those because they were fancy 8 gold rims. And I pick one, I'm like, okay, what am I do? I said, I've got this scar thing going on. I know, I'll get a mouthpiece so big that the scar's in the middle, and instead of playing this way, I'll play that way. And I tried it, and I'm like, all right, well, all right, it doesn't hurt as much, and I can play.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, all right, this is great. So I was at that point, I'm still in high school and working part-time in the music store, and a guy came in and they rented a bunch of instruments for the University of Toronto marching football band. And I'm like, oh really? I marched in a drum and bugle corps for a few years. And he went, you know how to march and play the trumpet? And I went, yeah, pretty good. He goes, well, how good? And I went, actually, I'm really good. He went, well, come on out. So I went out, I played, and he goes, yeah, you are really good. He goes, how about you play the solo in the field? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I'm at the University of Toronto marching band. These guys are like, what? Wow, I haven't seen you at the school. And I went, well, I'm not there yet. It's like, well, how come you're the soloist? I went, well, that's easy. I play better than you. How popular was I? Not too much.
I can imagine. You came and stole somebody's slot there. And,
I know, just like, sorry
and
guys.
I don't even go to this school, so hey.
Yeah, I'm still in high school, but yeah, I do play better than you. So anyways, I kept playing. And I thought, it's just not, I know I'm not as good as I could be. So I went to the best trumpet teacher in Toronto. His name was Don Johnson, since passed away, who became the head of Humber College, which is the big music college up there. And I said, Don, I played for him. He goes, oh, man, that's great. Sound good. I'm like, yeah. I said, but am I ever going to be as good as Maynard Ferguson? And he looked at me and went, no. I went, okay. Closed the trumpet case, sold the trumpet, went to the Ukrainian band that I was still playing in with a valve trombone. And they're all like, what the hell is that? I went, it's valve trombone. That's the thing I play now. Like, well, what happened to the trumpet? I went, I don't play that anymore.
You just want to get good at the next
I didn't care. I was just like,
well,
if I can't be really good then on that, then I'm going to play something else.
Sure.
So I played valve trombone for a while, and I thought, well, if I want to be a trombone player, I should learn how to, play a slide trombone. So I learned that on an Earl Williams number 6, beautiful trombone my brother gave me, and played on that for a while. And next thing you know, I decided I really didn't have. Now I'm working at the music store full time. I don't have time to practice. I said, well, I know if I can't play the highest notes in the band, I'll play bass trombone and I'll play the lowest notes in the band. Picked up a bass trombone, I'm like, oh hell yeah, this is way easier. I don't have to practice nearly as much. And I played bass trombone for about 10 years.
Wow.
And actually I ended up opening up my own band instrument store and mouthpiece making. My story's getting confused chronologically. So, before that happened, I decided Canada had 20 million people and no mouthpiece makers. America had 200 million, that shows how long ago it was, and they had about 20 mouthpiece makers. And I thought, well, damn, there's room for one north of the border.
The odds are in your favor.
That's what I thought, right? Because all the mouthpieces we sold were all like Giardinellis and Bachs and Schilkes and, Alcas. I got to meet Alcas when I was like 20 years old. He's an interesting guy.
I'm sure.
Speaking of which, he made wine and we drank it all day long. Here's to UL. Terry's homemade wine. So I spent a whole day with Alcas. It was great. Matter of fact, it was a great story. He gives me a mouthpiece and I'm playing it. I went, Al, I can't play any like low notes on this thing, like low F sharp or anything. And he looks at me and goes, low F sharp? We have 4th trumpet players for that. And he said, no, play goddamn high C, will you? And I'm like,
you knew what he wanted.
You got a point. I'm like, yeah, you're right, I don't play 4th trumpet. And he goes, well, then don't worry about it.
You could do that on a Bach mouthpiece.
That's right. He said, you can buy your 1.5 C, you can do that. So anyways, I was fascinated with the whole mouthpiece thing and decided I could make mouthpieces. and I was about 24. Went down, I phoned Bob Giardinelli, who I had known because we had been buying his mouthpieces. So I said, Mr. Giardinelli, I said, would you mind if I came to New York and saw how you make mouthpieces? And Bob said, sure, come on down. So I went down there and he walked me through the shop. And they didn't make their own blanks, so they did just all the finishing work. Right. They put in the backboards, they put in the cups. But they had an automatic screw-up machine company, I call it, as a, and you'll understand that, to make their blanks for them. But I watched how they did everything, did their silver plating, all that, and I'm like, all right, after about 3 hours, I'm like, all right, Bob, thanks, I'm gonna drive back to Toronto now. I said, but honestly, I said, you don't mind showing me everything? He goes, Terry, honestly, he goes, your chances of being a successful mouthpiece maker are 0 to none. And I went, no problem, no, that's fair enough. So I left, went back to Canada. My dad helped me out. I need to buy a lathe. And I'm like, I don't know what kind of lathe to buy. I said, maybe a turret lathe, because that's kind of cool. I saw one of those Giardinellis. I thought, yeah, it's probably a good thing to buy.
Modern.
Not really. So anyway, we find a turret lathe, a Herbert 2D. I never forget that thing. Get the thing delivered. I'm standing in front of it. I'm like, oh my God, it's got all these levers and shit. And I'm like, wow, I wonder what the hell that does. Oh, it's got a little spiral thing, so maybe makes it spin. I'm like, well, that didn't do anything. And I'm like, all right, I wonder what that button does. Oh, it makes it spin. Cool. Well, if I go the other way, it'll spin the, oh, all right, that's cool, I got that. That's a true story. I am clueless.
No machining experience.
Oh, none, zero.
And
none.
no one in your family.
No one in my family. Nobody. I didn't know shit about lathes or anything, right? But I wanted to be a mouthpiece maker. And as you know me well enough now, I'm a very determined jerk or person, depending on who you talk to.
And you're just a mouthpiece maker. We're all like that.
Well, that's true. So you understand. So anyway, so I figured the thing out. I lucked into, I figured out I needed to make drill holders. I'm such an idiot. Instead of like a chuck, I had each drill from 24 to 30 in its own holder. So I found a machine shop and I went to him, yeah, I want just with a number 27 drill in it. Yeah, sure, yeah, we can do that for you. So he made a bunch of stuff and finally he goes, Terry goes, listen, what are you doing? I showed him a mouthpiece. And he gave me the words of wisdom that I live by today and I've shared many, many times. He looked at it and he goes, well, any good machinist could make this thing. Making a business out of this thing, he goes, that is bleep hard. I went, oh, yeah, okay. He says, and by the way, you should not have to pay me to make all the stupid shit you're doing. He goes, you need to learn how to make this yourself. And I'm like, well, that's easier said than done. He goes, no, he goes, are you free on the weekends? And I went, well, Wednesday and Sunday, we're free from the music store. And he goes, well, then show up here. I'm like, okay. So Eric Davies was his name. He had a machine shop. I'd show up there and he goes, all right, this is a lathe. It was a Monarch 10E, blah, blah, tool room lathe, right?
Sure.
I'm like, oh, wow, that's
powerful.
Nice than what I got.
Yeah.
So he's teaching me how to do all that stuff. And I said, well, I need to make backboard reamers. He went, all right. I said, but I want them out of some steel that's never going to go dull. And he went, well, I don't know about never. He said, but we can get you some tool steel that's going to last a really long time. I went, okay, that's great. I said, what are you cutting it with? I went, brass. I went, oh, perfect. So we buy this T15 material, and I make all my own reamers and machine them on the lathe and polish them up. And I look at it and think, oh, beautiful, I've really done a good job. And he walks over and he goes, gets out a magnifying glass and he goes, uh-huh, yeah. Well, this is what's called highly polished and deeply scratched. He said, so keep sanding. He goes, here's some 1200 grit paper. I'll see you in an hour. I'm like, just a goddamn little piece of steel. I mean, it's like, how long I do? You know whatever I'm good. It's like,
I know
been there,
exactly.
done that, right?
And I've had apprentices quit, over the tiniest things. What seemed tiny to me, and probably tiny to you too, but back in the day when you had to do that the first time,
Yeah, what are you
It
gonna
seems
do?
like an impossible task.
And of course, back then, this is pre-CNC lathe, so I had to make all my own form tools.
Yeah.
So I machined all of those with the different cup shapes and everything. And,
Were you grinding them?
well, then he taught me how to use the grinder.
Yeah. Well, that's
I'm
even
like,
harder.
oh, this is going to be fun. So he's teaching me to use the grinder. I'm like, a horrible job. And then this one day, I was grinding something, I forget, and I had it mounted in the machine. And I'm going, it's a chunk of steel, I'm forgetting what I was making. And all of a sudden I hear, BAM! Clink, 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 clink. And the grinding wheel is gone. The shit I was working on is gone.
Your eyes were still there.
And a couple of guys in the workshop are on the floor, like that. And I'm like, oh, that was bad. Chunks of
The stone goes everywhere.
Oh, it shattered and went everywhere, and I'm standing going, oh, that was not good. And Eric comes up and he goes, you all right? I went, I am, but the machine's not very good. And he goes, no. He goes, tell you what though, he goes, if we keep this within $20, he goes, we're gonna stay friends. And I went, man, I feel so bad. And he goes, shit happens. which I've since learned is very, very accurate. So anyway, Eric taught me how to do all the machining and everything, and at the end of it all, I had my backward reamers, I had my cup cutting tools and everything, and he told me, he says, Terry, he goes, if this mouthpiece thing doesn't work out, he goes, could you come and work for me? He goes, you're making stuff my guys have trouble with. I'm like, okay.
You don't know how hard it is until after you've met someone who tells you.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that you do to make mouthpieces is stuff machinists would say, well, just engineer it properly, do it differently.
Yeah,
Why
right.
make that part, Because they're so long, and you've got the ratio of the diameter to the length.
Yeah.
People say, well, you shouldn't be doing that, right?
Yeah, right.
That's
a bad idea. It's like, well, yeah, but that's what I have
That's
to
what
do.
we do.
We have to do.
It helps we can cut them in half now, right?
Oh, well, yeah, that's true. So anyway, I got that all figured out, and I started making my mouthpieces and selling a few of them in Toronto area, and then a couple of places across the country. And I started my first little machine shop. Mouthpiece shop was not a machine shop by any stretch of any imagination. And John, who you met already, was my first employee. He was he was a trumpet student, and then he became a roommate actually. And I was making lots of money working at the music store, playing trumpet on the weekends, repairing instruments on the side, and doing really well. So I had a 2-bedroom penthouse type place, and he was living in one of the rooms and would drive me around and stuff. I mean, it was stupid. But anyways, he became like the first employee. And then the dumbest thing was the owner of the store said, well, I can't really have you running a business. He said, how about I buy half your business and then I'll provide you with a factory and I'll set you up and everything else. What did I say? No, I can do it on my own.
Of course you did.
Blow my brains out right
And it's
there.
amazing you had that offer so early.
He was a trumpet player.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he saw what I was doing. He
Saw
was
the
like,
potential.
wow, I can't believe you're doing it. He goes, you're actually doing it. I'm like, yes, sir, I am. I'm making them.
Yeah.
So anyways, I said no, went off on my own, and he said, well, you can't work here anymore. I went, oh, that's fine. So then I opened up my own band instrument store and mouthpiece shop, much like Giardinelli in New York was a band instrument store with a mouthpiece shop.
Yeah.
So, story continues. If this gets too long, folks, you can tune in like next week for part 2, which there may not be. However, this is interesting, so pay attention. So anyway, I end up meeting this girl on a cruise ship. I won a cruise because I bought so many buffet R13 clarinets for the music store. Did a contest, and it was like, you get 2 tickets on a cruise ship. And my owner of the store is like, I don't want to go on a cruise. He goes, Jerry, you did it all. He goes, you can have a cruise. I'm like, I've never been on a cruise before. He goes, well, you're going to now. Here's tickets for 2. And I'm like, man, who would I take? I didn't really have a real girlfriend at the time. I had a lot of girlfriends, but I didn't have like a girlfriend. So I took John. So John and I went on the cruise together. And while I was there, I met this young lady from New York City, all of about 16 years old at the time, but of course I was like 22 or something, 24 I guess. No, I don't know. Yeah, it was maybe, no, I don't know. Anyway, somewhere in there. And we stayed pen pals for a while. Bob Giardinelli was on the cruise. Chatted with him there. A bunch of other musical instrument guys were on the cruise because they bought
Because it's all
instruments.
from
Yeah,
Buffett.
all buffet clarinet buyers. And that ended up with, years later, I ended up marrying that girl, Robin. And she became Mrs. W too. And on one of our trips to New York, Bob invited me to go out sailing on a sailboat. I don't know if you know, but Bob Giardinelli was a real sailor. He was the Commodore of the Bayside Yacht Club.
Wow.
Yeah, he was hardcore.
That's...
So we went out in Bob Giardinelli's sailboat, and Bob says to me, he goes, still making stuff up there, huh? And I went, yes, sir. He goes, yeah, I know, I've heard about you. I went, yeah. And we're sailing along, and he goes, you know, I could really use a guy like you to work for me. And I went, no, why would I do that? He goes, no, seriously. I went, you couldn't afford it. And I went, Bob said, no, I'm sorry. It's like 1979. He goes, trust me, I can afford it. What do you mean? I went, I'd have to end up owning Giardinelli band instruments and mouthpieces and Warburton band instruments and mouthpieces in Canada, and I'd be the biggest guy in North America. I'm 28 years old, right? And he goes, well, what if that's what I had in mind? I went, okay. I said, I'll be here a week Monday. I have to go back to Canada, straighten everything out with my family that was working with me in the company. My brother was working for me, and Mom and Dad were working for me. I said, I'll be here a week Monday. A week Monday goes by, flying to LaGuardia, going to Manhattan, standing in front of Giardinelli's. Bob walks out and he goes, I thought you'd be here. So we went inside, and I said, well, what do you want me to do? And he goes, well, you can start by, I guess, organizing the Mouthpiece company and then, help me with everything else. I went, oh, okay. Then I get in there, and it was busy at the time, right? This place was jammed. Mm-hmm. And the secretary goes, Bob, where do you want him to sit? And Bob said, well, my office is big. He goes, I got my desk as this thing that slides out. He goes, he can sit in here with me. Everybody's like, who the hell is this kid?
Right.
And that first day, Linda, his secretary, at 4 o'clock, Bob would have a shot of scotch. That was like ritual.
Sure.
So she comes in about 10 to 4, and she goes, Bob, what about him? Bob looks up over the half round. Dad, you like scotch? I went, sure. Linda, 2. The rest of the employees are all like, what? This guy's in his first day? What's that all about? So that was, the Giardinelli stories are long. There's many of them. But to suffice it to say that I loved working there. Met everybody, Lou Soloff, Marvin Stamm, I mean, all the New York guys, right? John Faddis was a regular. And every weekend I'd fly back to Toronto and run my business up there. I'd fly back to New York Monday morning. Well, 9 months of that were not a whole lot of fun anymore. Back then, 1979 was pre-Giuliani, so New York City was shitty. No, it's like it is now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, horrible. And I said, Bob, things are going tough in Canada. We got Jimmy Carter's got the 20% interest rates. Everything's like going to shit. I got to stay up there for a while, take care of things. He goes, yeah, that's fine, go ahead. Meanwhile, we had an apartment in Bayside, my wife and I at the time. I said, I got to stay in Canada for a while. I went back. It was a mess. I knew it was a mess. And I'm like, you know what? We got to close the business. So I tried working it out with the bank, working it out with Con Selmer, with a bunch of money, just a Selmer company then. Ended up, I went bankrupt in 1979 and lost everything and was totally broke. And decided that at this point I could, because I had married Robin so that she could work in Canada legally, I ended up where I could have a legal green card in America, which is why I was working at Giardinelli's. messed that timeline up a little bit.
Sure.
And so I thought, you know what? I'm free to go anywhere. Well, then I get a phone call from Reno Schilke. He goes, Terry goes, I hear you're footloose and fancy free. I mean, well, I'm footloose. I don't know about how free I am. He goes, I want you to come to Chicago, work for me. I went, Reno, I kind of got my mind set on Florida. So Chicago, I've been there in the summer and it sucks. And I've been there in the winter and it sucks even more. As much as I would love to work with you at the Schilke factory, no. He's like, come on down, fly down for you. I'll put you up at my penthouse down by the lake shore. And I'm like, no, save the money. I'm not doing it. So I moved to Florida. And that was July 17, 1980, just to give everybody a timeline here, keep everything square. And of course, I went there with my wife de jour, Robin, and then everything I owned fit in the back of a 1969 Chevy.
Wow.
Yeah, I owned like nothing. I had nothing.
Sure.
But what I did have was the Hunt brothers had driven up the price of silver to $50 an ounce back then. Mr. Smarts had 100 ounces of silver coins that I had purchased.
Stowed away, I know.
And I sold them all, and I used that money to buy my first lathe for $1,200.
Wow. So you had the foresight to have a little nest egg even that young.
I didn't even think of it as a nest egg. They were these coins, 2-ounce coins, and they each had a different sailboat over the years of the sailing. So that's the only reason I had
You just collected them.
I collected them just because they had sailboats on them.
Yeah.
And I did it over a couple of years. So it
Was that because prices spiked after the oil crisis? And
the Hunt brothers tried to corner the silver market. Do a little research. It's fascinating.
Okay.
They drove the silver price right up.
Wow.
And then it crashed.
So they did
I
that.
sold it before the price crashed and took that money and had that when I moved down to the States.
Wow.
Bought a lathe, and I had met a guy, Rensselaer K, who had a repair shop there, A sharp music, not to be confused with B flat. And he gave me a spot in his shop to have my mouthpiece shop because he thought it would be good to attract customers
Right.
to his shop, and it worked that way.
No.
And that worked for a while. And then the wife and I didn't work, so she went packing back to New York. And I was there, not making a whole lot of money, making mouthpieces, I mean, literally by hand, making each blank on a manual machine. Yeah, it was no fun.
Takes forever. Yeah.
Yes, it did. But I didn't have to make that many because I didn't sell that many, so it didn't really matter. And I ended up sleeping on a cot in the back of his shop. Yeah, I've had some highs and lows. That was one of the lows. And I ended up working with him for a while. That story gets so long, I don't even bother with anybody with that one. And the bottom line is, we split up. I started making a few trumpets, bought some parts pieces from different people, put them together. And there's about 52 of them out there. They were modular lead pipes, modular bells.
Wow, cool.
It was 19.
I've heard of these, but I've
85.
never held one.
Yeah, 84, 85, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And him and I split up, and I went off to, that's a worse story, but anyway, I still like the guy. I got screwed good. And I ended up working in a shop the size, it was a little carport garage. It was probably 20 by 10. And it was on the side of a woman's house on her garage. And I'm in there, and I had a lathe and a turret lathe and my little plating system, and that was my shop, that was my factory, right? And the gentleman who bought out Giardinelli Music, Bob Scheiwiller, phones up, hey, I'm going to be in Fort Lauderdale, I want to come tour the factory. And I went, sure. I said, well, it's not going to take real long. So Bob shows up, and of course there's this beautiful house right on a canal, and he's like, oh man, you are living large. I went, I would be if that was my house.
Right.
I said, but it's not. The lady's letting me use her garage, and I'm sleeping in there too. I mean, in that same 10 by 20 foot. I had my desk, office desk here, and I built a bunk above it. and that was my life.
That
right
sounds
there.
familiar. I've done something similar.
No, it wasn't for the first time either. And I ended up doing the same thing in Toronto before I even got there. So there I am, and Bob Scheibler shows up and tours the factory, and he goes, "Well, you sure got the world fooled." I went, "Yeah, it's a little smaller than you would have thought." And he goes, "No, it's way smaller than I would have thought." So anyway, we went out sailing on Bob Scheibler's boat at the time, so that was a good time. And Giardinelli came to visit me after that. I ended up with a shop down in Hollywood with another repairman in. And we ended up having a shop side by side, so I actually had a real shop.
Oh, nice.
And his repair shop was beside mine, so we were side by side. And Tom Lytle was his name. And Tom and I got along real good, and we had customers coming and going, and I was starting to do okay. And then, still struggling along, and then a friend of mine, I got a customer, ordered a mouthpiece, and his name was Mike Padula. And I'm like, "Okay, Mike, yeah, what do you want?" He was up in the Orlando area. So I made him a custom mouthpiece, and he sent a check in. They actually used checks in those days. Sends a check in, it says MP Manufacturing. I went, "Well, that's interesting." So I phoned him, I said, "What do you manufacture?" He went, "Well, I got a machine shop. We make all sorts of parts, pieces for Disney rides and stuff like that." And I'm like, "Wow, really?" He goes, "Yeah, I've got, a couple of CNC milling machines, a CNC lathe." I went, "What's that?" And he goes, "Well, next time you drive through, come on up, I'll show you."
Mm-hmm.
So I drove up to Orlando. I'm like, "Oh, this is a visit his shop." I'm like, "Wow, that's a CNC lathe? Look at that shit." I said, "Where's the handles?" And he goes, "It doesn't have any handles." I'm like, "Well, how do you make it move?"
It's magic, right?
I know, right? He starts punching buttons on a control and starts moving. I'm like, "Dude,
Yeah.
that's awesome." So anyways, a couple of months or whatever, a year went by, whatever. And I still stayed friends with Mike and stayed at his house and everything and watched his two boys grow up. And one day we get to talking, he goes, "Hey, how about I buy half your company and you move up here and then you can use all my equipment?" I went, "You know what? I should do that." So I packed up from Hollywood, Florida, and I moved up to Orlando and went in with Mike in his machine shop. And that first CNC lathe, Condor 16 something, I don't know what the hell it was,
yeah.
with an analam control.
I remember the
So,
analysts.
did you?
They have a green screen?
Oh, I forget. No, it's kind of a big box with a panel and stuff.
Okay.
Like a standalone box,
Mhm.
giant thing. I don't know
Yeah,
what
that
the
sits on the
hell's
floor.
going on in there, yeah. So here's a funnier story. So Kenny Titmus, who then worked with me for 34 years, had just started with me a couple months earlier. So Kenny came up to see what was going on. And I'm like, "Kenny, check this out. This is how we're gonna make trumpet tops." Mike had set the machine up to make tops, right? So I'm in there, I'm like, "Yeah, watch this." I get it start up, and I hit start. Bam!
Crashed it.
Crashed it right into the chuck. And Kenny looks at me and goes, "That's how we're gonna make trumpet tops?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" Well, I didn't realize that those kind of machines, when you wake them up, wherever they wake up, they think that's zero.
You have to reset the
I
index to
didn't
zeros.
reset the zeros, and Mike came out and he goes, "Wow, that's kind of ugly." And I went, "Mike, I mean, I've been there like a week, right?" I'm like, "Jesus, dude, I feel bad." And he goes, starts it up, and he goes, "It still runs, we're all right." So anyway, that was my introduction to CNC lathes,
That
right?
seems like luck, because like today they have the encoders that will like stop it because something went wrong or whatever. But those older machines with boxways, they could kill themselves.
Oh, this was going full tilt, 2100 maximum, 2100 RPMs,
Wow.
full throttle into the chuck,
Wow.
the four-way tool post.
Did they have a real
Flying.
Did they even have a real e-stop, or because back then I know a lot of machines
It
didn't have a
probably
big.
probably did, but
But you're like, you don't
Yeah,
think about it. It's too
I
late.
wasn't thinking about it as it's going. Boom! I'm like, oh, too late.
Unrelated, I had an employee who did that to one of my machines, and she came in, she was just sobbing, she was crying, she couldn't tell me what happened, she was shaking, and she quit. That crash that was the end of it.
Well, I have a new theory at my shop. I always tell people, because shit happens, right?
Mhm.
Tools break, this happens. I said, "Guys, trust me, none of you can invent a new screw up. I've done them all. I
Yeah.
said, so when you crash something, just go, oh well.
Yeah, I mean,
Buy
it's
another
not-
tool. It's like, guess what? Do I expect stuff to happen? Yes, I do. So don't worry about it. Because a lot of times, like, oh my God, look what I've done. I'm like, yeah, what? I've done that.
exactly. You know, you're gonna bounce back from it. And a lot of times the machine's fine.
Most of the time, thank God. Once in a while, it's not so fine. But anyway, so in my saga, is this getting too long? I mean, I'm sorry.
No, it's not at all. Everybody wants to hear this.
So this might be good for me because as you know, at my age, as dementia kicks in, I forget all this shit. So after I finished crashing his machine, of course, that Kenny moved up and I bought a home and we were living there with wife number 3, Terry Lynn, and that didn't last either. And she moved back to Fort Lauderdale, and I stayed up there and worked with Mike. And then next thing you know, him and I had 2 A-type personalities in the same building. Well, it didn't work out in the long run, and finally Mike goes, I gotta get you to move out of the shop, and I need the space because I've got a lot of stuff I'm doing. I think he was building stuff for Epcot or something, whatever was going on at Disney. And you need to move, like it was a whole bunch of bays, right? He says, you need to move like 4 bays over, there's an opening down there. I'm like, whatever, fine, I'll do that. And he goes, I'll tell you what, this CNC lathe that you know how to run now, he goes, I need a new milling machine, so I'll get you this lathe and I'll co-sign the finance for it so that you can own this lathe. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. So he moved it over to my shop, 4 doors over, which I'd gone in and I painted everything, big blue stripe, and I really made it nice, right? So I get everything moved over there. Don't see Mike Neal, he's like not 500 feet away in his bay, right? And I'm like, he comes over one day, he goes, you haven't been over to see me. I said, how's things going? He looks at racks and Mouthpiece and he goes, oh, yeah, you did figure it all out, huh? And I went, yeah, I did. It was not easy, but I did figure it all out. And that machine made a whole bunch of parts and pieces. And then about a year later, he comes over and he goes, Terry goes, man, I hate to ask you this. He goes, business is growing to the point where I need 2 bays side by side, and the only 2 in this whole bunch of stuff is yours and the one beside it's coming open. I'm like, yeah? He goes, how would you feel about moving back to the original shop? I'm like,
Wow.
really?
Wow.
But I owed him. I'm like,
Yeah.
Mike, I'll move back to the original shop.
Yeah.
So I packed up and moved all my crap back to the original shop, which of course my bay was all beautiful, clean, painted, and nice.
You have to go back
The
to
original shop
Grungeville.
was all Grungeville, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, fine, I'll do that. So I went and moved back to that shop and worked there for a couple of years, and then, oh, here's a sidebar. So then I rented a shop around the corner for whatever reason. I know the reason. How about Warburton Motorcycle Shop? You didn't know about that, did you?
I did not know about that, but it sounds really cool.
Yeah, so I bought out a guy who was doing motorcycle repairs, and I met a mechanic who convinced me that he would work there doing the repairs if I would buy out all these motorcycles. We're talking over 100 of them. Sure, why not? That's a great, I love motorcycles, so okay. So I buy out this guy's motorcycle shop and we set up, somewhere I have a picture of this great Warburton motorcycle shop, and I had the Mouthpiece shop over here. And that worked for a while, and then that summer, as another sidebar, I get a letter from this kid, his name's Carl Hammond, and he wants a summer internship, and his university would pay for half his wages or whatever. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine. So Carl shows up, and I said, well, what your specialty is? Oh, music marketing. I'm like, that's great. Yeah, that'll be helpful.
Yeah.
So I asked him, I said, Carl, can you drop an ad for this or that? Well, no, you couldn't. I said, how do you feel about sanding backboards? So I put Carl to work in the shop, sanding backboards, and somewhere a picture of him sitting at the turret lathe or something, right? And that worked out for a while, and I ended up getting Carl, he was from Chicago. I ended up getting a job with Schilke, because he wanted to move back to Chicago with his wife, and I'm like, and business has slowed down, like, you know what, let me call Joan Schilke.
Yeah.
Talk to her, and I'm like, Joan, you should hire this guy, he's really good. No. And finally they said, yes. So he moved back there, worked for Schilke for, I don't know, 10, 12 years before he opened up his own Carl Hammond Mouthpieces.
Right.
So I'm very proud of that, because he's kind of like an offshoot protege.
Yeah, and he does really good work.
And he does good work.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a good teacher, you know what I mean? So, I'm gonna get lost here. So there's a motorcycle shop, and the next thing you know, a bunch of redneck idiots, and I'm like, all right, this was a bad idea. I'm like, this is never gonna work. So I decided, you know what? No. And at this point, I had met Johan's mother, Linda Young, she's a trumpet player. She was in the Disney All-Star Orchestra, and they all came out to the shop. And next thing you know, she decided that she'd like to come down here. She was a good trumpet player, still is apparently, although we don't talk, that's a different story. And she ended up moving down. I had let her get a room in my house, and she stayed there. She was doing work with the Burt Reynolds Theater, got to meet Burt Reynolds, and you know, she was a good trumpet player. So she was doing the pit orchestra, or whatever she was doing down in Jupiter, Florida. And we ended up getting married, and we ended up moving out to the house that burned down out in the country, only because there was no qualifying. I just had to take over the mortgage, because as a self-employed person, you have no credit, by the way. Doesn't matter what you've done or how long. So I ended up, the real estate lady goes, well, there's like fixer-uppers, there's He-Man fixer-uppers, and there's this place. And I'm like, perfect, let me look at it. So we get out there, and a big, huge place that had a big extension on it, all concrete floors. I'm like, oh, hell yeah. So I ended up moving out to the country, outside of Orlando, north of Oviedo. I get out there and move my machine, you know, the machinery guy brings the lathe out, right? Well, it's a house, there's no garage door big enough, there's no garage, actually. And the guy comes out, and he's got the flatbed with the same Condor lathe on it, right? And he goes, Terry, how are we gonna get it inside the house? I went, no problem, just give me a minute, man. Get a chainsaw. You're standing there going, you're kidding. I went, is that big enough? And he went, yeah. I'm like, oh, move it right in here.
Must not have been wiring in that wall.
No, I checked for that, by the way. So anyway, what's even funnier, I met him years later as a machinery mover, and he goes, dude, I still tell that story. And I went, yeah, I've done some crazy stuff, but that would happen to be one of them.
That's, you know, and riggers say they've seen everything, and they have.
Oh, yeah. So I got the fixer-upper, and I spent years fixing it up. I mean, I fixed their 4 bathrooms and 4 bedrooms, and I'm redoing kitchen, I'm redoing everything. Matter of fact, for the first year, I actually lived in an RV while I fixed it up. It was that bad.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't even use this home. But had a lot of poured concrete I could put my machines on, so that was okay. So we stayed out there until 2000. Well, in 2004, we had a hurricane come through and deposit an oak tree in my kitchen the hard way, straight through the ceiling.
Wow.
Yeah, that was fun. Hurricane Charlie, God bless him. So I fixed all that. It blew out my 24-foot above ground pool. I cut it up with shears, patched my roof, because I knew that the sun always shines after a hurricane, interestingly enough, because it sucks all the moisture out.
Yeah.
You get blue skies, but it won't last, and I knew that. So I patched up the roof and everything. Sure as hell it rained like a mother after that. So Anyway, I got the insurance money to fix the roof, but I fixed it myself. Then the next year, we had the fire. And the whole place burns down. All the machinery, all the work I'd done, the whole house burns to the ground.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, this sucks. When they scrapped it, to give you an idea, 60,000 pounds of steel
Wow.
was the machinery I had. Had I just bought a new load of brass? Oh, hell yeah. And was it all bent like noodles? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we scrapped all that. And the funniest, one of the funnier stories, because it is funny, kind of. An employee, Sue Chad, she drives up, looks, and of course there's nothing but this smoldering pile where the building was. She gets out and she goes, I'd been there all night, right? I'm still there. And she goes, Terry, she's crying. She goes, you're always telling us, don't be upset for what you don't have, be happy for what you do have. She goes, you don't have shit. And I went, not true. I said, Sue, I have my health, I have my wisdom, I have my friends, I have my great customers for years, and I have my desire just to start over again. I said, so I'm happy for what I have, just like I told you.
Yeah.
And right there, we started all over again. Local musicians put on a fundraiser for me, concert, big performance, it was great. And raised like $7,000 just from, and then on our website, we had donations, $50. I don't want anybody to spend more than $50, right?
Sure.
So the $50 donation started like flooding in. And then of course, one guy's like, I didn't realize the way the website was set up, he could choose 5 of them.
Mm.
I want 5 of those donations. And next thing he's like sending $250. I'm like, all right, somehow change that. I don't want people doing that.
Right.
You know, 50
Yeah.
bucks, that's enough. I got so much that I could go out, and my wife, wonderful woman that she is, went out, whacked her American Express card for a little hard-inch two-room lathe,
Sure.
and away I went one more
Super
time.
precision, what'd you get?
Oh, I don't know, I forget. what
Whatever
it
you
was.
needed, right?
Yeah. Anyway, I got it. I think I still have it.
Did you have backups of programs?
Well, that was a different story. All the trumpet mouthpieces were still from my form tools,
Oh, okay.
which of course the fire adjusted them inappropriately.
Mm-hmm.
All the lower brass was computer programs,
Mm-hmm.
which wisely my computer guru, Jerry Jackson, who's still my best friend and my computer guru, he made sure that everything was on a disk at his house.
Oh, nice.
So I had a disc which melted. Jerry had a disc. What else Jerry had was all the photos of my kids from the time they were babies. I said, he goes, oh yeah, I got a couple of discs here. I said, what do they say? He goes, oh, one says photos. I went, would you look at that?
Yeah.
He looks, he goes, dude, there's like 1,000 pictures on here. I'm like, hell yeah, there is. So I ended up saving all that stuff.
That's amazing.
Because the fire, all we got out of the fire was the original stamping machine
Okay.
from 1974, which we
Yeah.
still use. John laughed, he's like, no way, because he remembers getting that machine,
Yeah.
right? And we found Frank Rosalino's trombone mouthpiece that he gave me. In all the pile of ashes and crap, it's
Uh-huh.
like, what's that? And I'm like, whoa, give me that thing.
Yeah, that's
I have
great.
it on my desk right now, actually. That was funny. It was one of the few things. And one of the other things was, you gotta imagine, the place was like 5,000 square feet. I mean, so, and it's all just a big pile of crap.
Yeah.
Digging through the crap, I pull up this thing, I pull it up, it's a picture of my daughter
Oh.
that didn't burn. The back burned,
Mhm.
I flip it over, and there she is, and I'm thinking, wow.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still have it somewhere. All right, don't start me crying on this because that was pretty emotional. So anyways, fire burns and we start over again. And I rented a shop in Oviedo. And those are the mouthpieces that are stamped Oviedo.
Mhm.
But starting at that point, I programmed all of the trumpet mouthpieces. And from being hand tooled to, or form tooled plus hand tool
Yeah.
for some of them. And I'm like, no, they're all gonna go on computer, that's the end of this. So all of those became, I learned how to use AutoCAD 2000.
Sure.
What does that tell you?
Yeah, that was a primitive program, but it worked.
It worked.
It's way easier to use actually than today, if you're doing 2D stuff.
And I still use AutoCAD.
Yeah.
And my son uses SolidWorks and all the fancy stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what do I need that for? I'm making a trumpet mouthpiece,
Right.
you know? So away we went one more time, and then we decided to move out to where I am now, Mims, Florida, over by the coast. And Ann found a home with a detached garage, big Quonset hut type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she showed it, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't have much equipment. I said, man, set it up right in that Quonset hut,
Yeah.
got a home. It was 2009. The economy had crashed, the housing bubble crashed, and I picked up an acre of property with a 4-bedroom home with the separate building for $135,000.
Wow.
I'm like,
That's amazing.
sign me up.
That's amazing.
So we moved out there in 2009, and we've been out there ever since, and we stayed in the garage. And next thing you know, we expanded the building over here, and they expanded it over there. Next thing you know, the garage is up to like 3,000 square feet, and Ann said, you gotta move. And originally I thought, well, yeah, I'm 60 years old, I'm gonna slow down, I'm gonna get small, just me and Kenny and another employee, Celeste. I'm like, no, that's enough. Then Kenny invented the Pete, which we've now sold 74,000 of. Thank you, Kenny, for upsetting my retirement plans. And next thing you know, now we're in an 8,000 square foot building in Mims. Then now we're in a 12,000 square foot building in Mims. And I'm like, oh, no, I gotta stop. I'm getting too old to grow anymore. I don't want to do this. Spend more time on boats. And that kind of brings us up to today, but you didn't ask me too many questions. Go ahead. I know. Did I babble too much? No.
You answered one question,
That's it? And all that time?
and it was a good one. The question was, what were your dreams? And it sounds like that's what you lived, were your dreams. And the other question I always ask is, what were the rumors that go along with that? And the rumors are the trials and tribulations which you shared.
I had enough trials and tribulations.
And I know there are more that you could share, like from my own experience living life and doing things. And I know it's a synopsis is what you're giving us,
Yeah.
but it's really nice. And hopefully we can, follow up on some of that stuff in another episode. Do it again, because what you shared is going to ask a lot of people a lot of questions, and they're going to say, "Wait a minute, Terry, what about this or that? You said there's one more little thing." People are going to start asking you questions.
Yeah, trust me, there was, in 50 years, there's a lot of stuff to cover, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't get it all in an
I
hour.
kind of glossed over a few areas here and there, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing story. It's I know it's just a short abbreviated version, but you've had quite the life already.
So far, so good.
Where do you want to go now?
Well, I was going to write my memoirs, and like I said, I'm going to call it, it's been a good first half, and I can just keep going. Because now my son, God bless him, is smarter than I am, genius at machining. He's a wizard at milling machines and lathes, and he's decided, he moved back from Italy after he's going to become a professional French horn player, after his dad put him through school in Lugano, Switzerland. He moves back, works for me for 2 years, and goes, Dad, I think I'm going to move up to Washington, D.C. and open up Warburton Precision Brass Works, and I'm going to manufacture parts and pieces for other people in the industry. I'm like, really? Like who? Like me? You're going to manufacture parts for me? I said, great, because then I can slow down. He goes, no, I don't want to make your stupid mouthpiece. He goes, you keep making the mouthpieces. He goes, I want to make other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very proud of him, and he's going to carry on the name, just not in the same building. But I'm lucky enough to have good people working for me. Kim Obashan, who you met.
Mm-hmm.
Kim will end up taking over the business.
Yeah.
Because she's a good trumpet player, and she loves what she's doing. She's already been with me 10 years, which seems scary to think, but
Mm-hmm.
the legacy will live on. I'm just gonna like totter along until they push me in on a wheelchair for my 75th anniversary celebration. I'll be like, what am I doing here anyways? Well, hopefully not. It could happen. We'll look back at this video and go, oh my God, he was so right. Anyways, I want to thank Jason for doing this. This is
Thank
great.
you. Yeah, it's
He's
been
one of
awesome.
the up and coming superstars of the industry, of which we happen to be a part of. And both of us are probably going to be in it for a long time. I know I am. Well, no, I have been. And I'm going to be. Yeah, both.
Yeah, we'll be here till the end.
We're here for the duration, as they say. And thank anybody that actually managed to make it to the end of this video.
Which wouldn't surprise me if it's hundreds of thousands of people within a year, because your story is really, really interesting. And I think a lot of people can relate to all those trials. And I'm sure a lot of people, musicians and otherwise, people that aren't even musicians, machine shop owners, a lot of people can relate to your story.